Ever had a woman do something so sweet, so thoughtful that you felt lucky to have her? What if I told you that some of those loving gestures can actually be calculated moves to control you, get her way, or shift the power in your relationship without you even noticing? Stay with me, because once you see these tactics for what they really are, you'll never fall for them again. Jessica OS here, welcome to the channel. Remember to always check the channel name to be sure that it says Jessica OS, to be completely guaranteed that this video is produced by me. Now, in this video, I'm exposing 5 seemingly loving things women do that aren't as innocent as they look. We'll break down what's really happening, why it works on men, and how you can spot it before it puts you in the palm of her hand. And I'll give you solutions to counter these if you ever find yourself in that situation, so stay tuned. All right, let's jump right into it. Number 1, the over-the-top praise. Now, you've heard the line, wow, you're literally the best man I've ever met. Or maybe it's, no one could ever compare to you. And hey, in the moment, it feels amazing to hear that. Your ego is glowing, your chest is out, you're thinking, finally, someone who truly appreciates me, right? But here's the game. When praise feels excessive, constant, and a little too perfectly timed, it's not just a compliment, it's bait. She's creating a psychological debt in your mind. It's the same principle that salespeople use when they butter you up before pitching you something expensive. Men fall for this because they're wired to respond positively to validation, especially from a woman they're attracted to. But the problem comes when that validation becomes a setup for compliance later. Let me explain. A setup for compliance is when someone deliberately uses or creates a situation that makes you more likely to say yes to what they want, often without you realizing it. It's a psychological tactic that works by building up certain emotions and expectations or obligations first, so that when the request finally comes, you feel like agreeing is the natural or only response you can give. Here's how it usually plays out. They lay the groundwork. This could be, say, excessive praise, doing you favors, showing vulnerability, or showering you with affection. The goal is to put you in a positive, softened, or indebted state of mind. They frame the request in a way that aligns with the version of you that they've been reinforcing. So, for example, let's say she's been telling you all week how generous and thoughtful you are. Then when she asks for something big, she says, I know you'll say yes because you're such a caring guy. Now, saying no doesn't just mean rejecting the request. It feels like you're contradicting the identity that she's been complimenting. The emotional trap has been set. By the time the request arrives, it's harder for you to refuse because, well, you feel grateful and want to reciprocate. You feel guilty if you say no. And you don't want to disappoint the positive image that, they've built for you. It's basically manipulating the conditions just before the ask, so the answer is more likely to be in their favor. It's not that compliments are bad, far from it. But when they're nonstop, exaggerated, or always leading to a, by the way, blah, 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 that's when you should take a step back and ask yourself, is she building me up or buttering me up? You can counter over-the-top praise by doing 3 simple things. Slow it down, separate the compliment from compliance, and test the intent. I'll break it down. So slow it down, right? Don't respond emotionally right away. And you need to learn this. Now, when someone, or in this case, a woman, is piling on compliments, your natural instinct is to soak it in and feel connected. But if it's excessive or perfectly timed before a potential ask, what you want to do is to pause and mentally take note. Instead of reacting with an instant thank you, that means a lot, followed by maybe extra generosity, simply smile, acknowledge it briefly, and move the conversation on. Now, when you do this, it prevents them from anchoring you in a heightened emotional state that's easier to influence. Second thing, separate the compliment from the compliance. If the compliment is followed by, say, a request, you want to create a clear mental and verbal gap between the two. So, for example, let's say she says something like, you're honestly the most generous man I've ever met. Hey, can we do blah, blah, blah? Your answer should sound like this. Hey, I appreciate you saying that. Now, about what you're asking, let's look at it on its own. Now, this subtly communicates that you're not going to let flattery override your decision making. 3, test the intent. Real praise stands on its own. Manipulative praise often needs a payoff. Try delaying your answer or lightly declining the request to see if the praise continues at the same level. If it drops off or worse, turns into subtle guilt trips, you've actually exposed an ulterior motive. Let's move on. Secondly, I want to talk about the strategic vulnerability. So opening up about your fears, insecurities, or a painful past can be a beautiful thing in a relationship when it's genuine. But when a woman times it perfectly to steer the outcome of a conversation or to make you feel guilty about standing your ground, that's when it turns into a manipulation tactic. Right? It works because it taps into your natural instinct to protect and comfort her. Now, the moment she shares something deeply personal, your defenses drop. You feel like the bad guy if you keep pushing your original point. So, for example, you tell her you're not ready to move in together with her, okay? Now, instead of engaging in a straightforward discussion, she shifts into this tearful confession about how every man she's loved has abandoned her and how basically the thought of living apart makes her feel anxious. Now, once she says this, you're no longer debating a practical decision. You're defending yourself against unspoken accusation that, well, you're just like the other guys who hurt her. Now, here's the tricky part. You start second-guessing your own needs. You think, if I push this, she's going to see me as heartless. In that moment, the conversation is no longer about your boundary, it's about her pain and the guilt that she just planted in your mind securely. Real vulnerability is about connection, not control. But when she weaponizes it, you'll notice it's always conveniently timed right before you're about to hold her accountable, refuse something, or stand firm in your boundaries. You can counter strategic vulnerability by protecting two things: your empathy and your boundaries, so you don't let guilt override good judgment. For example, what you want to do is acknowledge the emotion, but don't abandon the point. Okay, so when someone drops an emotional confession right before or during an argument or disagreement, they're often hoping that you shift focus from the issue to comforting them. So instead, what you want to do is to separate the two. For example, you say, hey, I hear you. I get that it's hard for you, but let's address that after we finish talking about whatever the original issue was. That's how you want to respond. This will show compassion without letting the topic derail. Second thing you want to do is to spot the timing, okay? Real vulnerability can happen anytime, anywhere, right? Manipulative vulnerability, on the other hand, has perfect timing. And it's usually when you're about to say no, enforce a boundary, or ask for accountability. So take note. 3, refuse the emotional guilt trap. Now, if her vulnerability makes you feel like rejecting her request means hurting her, you want to pause before responding. Ask yourself, will I still say yes if she hadn't shared that information right now? If the answer is no, you've spotted manipulation. Let's move on. The self-sacrifice move. Now, on the surface, this one looks like pure love. She does something big for you, something you didn't ask for, something that seems thoughtful and selfless, and you're thinking, wow, she really cares about me. But there's a catch, and there are strings attached. Maybe not in the exact moment, but trust me, the bill always comes later. I mean, listen, it's not really a gift if it's being stored away as leverage. For example, let's say she wakes up early in the morning, drives across town to bring you your favorite breakfast and says, oh, just wanted to make your day, right? Sweet. Fast forward, 2 days later, you tell her you can't make it to a friend's birthday dinner, for instance, because maybe you're tired from work. And suddenly she hits you with, after everything I do for you, you can't even come with me for one night. That loving act wasn't about kindness. It was a deposit in the you owe me account. And the reason this works so well is because humans hate feeling ungrateful. You start thinking, maybe you're in the wrong, and you give in. Not because you want to, but because she framed it as repayment for her sacrifice. You see, true love gives without keeping score. As simple as that. If her nice gestures always circle back to guilt-tripping you into compliance, you're not in romance, you're in a silent transaction. Now, you can counter the self-sacrifice move by recognizing it for what it is, a gift with hidden strings, and refusing to get tangled in a guilt web when it comes time for repayment. The self-sacrifice move only works if you accept the unspoken contract that kindness is equal to obligation. Once you politely but consistently break that link, the tactic will lose power. So first, don't over-reward unsolicited favors, right? When she does something big you didn't ask for, say thank you, but keep it simple and neutral. Over-the-top gratitude will feed that emotional leverage that she might use later. For example, you could say, I appreciate that you did this, it was thoughtful, and then move on. 2, separate kindness from obligation. If she later brings up the favor as a reason you owe her something, calmly make the distinction. For example, say, hey, I'm grateful for what you did, but I need to decide this based on what's best for me and not because you did something for me in the past. It makes it clear you won't be emotionally blackmailed. 3. Watch for the scorekeeping pattern. Now, true generosity doesn't keep a tally. If her nice gestures are consistently followed by guilt trips, mentally note the trend. It's easier to say no without feeling like you're the bad guy. If you've experienced even one of these tactics, I want you to hit that like button so the video reaches more men who need to hear this. And make sure you subscribe to this channel for more real talk like this multiple times a week. 4. The sudden physical affection. Now, physical affection is one of the most powerful emotional currencies in a relationship. A hug, a kiss, or intimacy can instantly melt tension, make you feel secure, and trigger a flood of bonding chemicals in your brain. Here's where it gets dangerous, however. When that affection appears out of nowhere, and only after you've set a boundary or expressed dissatisfaction. Suddenly, instead of addressing the issue, she distracts you with closeness. For example, let's say you tell her you're uncomfortable with a certain male friend that she keeps texting late at night. Rather than having an honest conversation about it, guess what she does? She spends the next 48 hours being extra cuddly, kissing you more, initiating sex more often, etc. And you start feeling like things are amazing again, and maybe you're overreacting. Now, this works because it hijacks your decision making. You see, affection isn't just being sweet. It's rewiring your emotional state so you forget why you were upset in the first place. It replaces confrontation with pleasure, and before you know it, the problem is buried under a layer of warm, fuzzy feelings until it pops back up again unresolved. Real intimacy should be about connection and not control. Get this. If it only shows up right after tension, be careful, because you might not be making peace, you might just be getting pacified. Now, you can counter the sudden physical affection by separating the emotional high it creates from the decision or boundary that triggered it. I'll give you 3 ways to do this. 1, you want to recognize the pattern and pause before you respond. When she comes in with the hugs and kisses or intimacy right after tension, take a beat. You can appreciate the closeness without letting it erase the conversation that you were having. For example, you want to smile, hug her back briefly and say, hey, I'm glad we're good, but I still want to finish what we're talking about. 2, you want to call it out lightly. Now, sometimes just acknowledging the timing disarms the tactic. For example, you can laugh slightly and say, you're trying to charm me out of the point, aren't you? Said with humor, it will signal that you see what's happening without it turning into a fight. 3, you want to set the sequence. How do you do this? Flip the script. Make affection something that follows resolution and doesn't replace it. For example, you could say, once we sort this out, I'd love to just relax and be close again. These tactics work because affection triggers oxytocin, which makes you more trusting and less defensive. By pausing, separating, and returning to the issue, you break the chemical shortcut and keep control of the conversation. And finally, the I did it for us justification. Now, this one actually sounds noble, like she's thinking about the relationship, about what's best for both of us, right? But the problem is it often skips one very important step, which is your consent. Now, when a woman uses this tactic, she makes a decision on your behalf, then wraps it in a warm blanket of, oh, I did it for us, so you don't feel guilty for questioning it. It shifts the focus from her bypassing your input to you supposedly not appreciating her effort. For example, she signs you both for a couple's retreat without asking you. And when you say you can't take the time off, she hits you with, well, I just want us to grow together. Why can't you see that, right? Now, the conversation isn't about her making a unilateral decision. It's about you looking like the guy who doesn't care about the relationship. And it works because it frames resistance as selfishness. You're not just saying no to the plan, you're saying no to us, right? That's what she's trying to say. And in most men's minds, that's a quick road to feeling like a bad partner. Look, the truth is real partnership means collaboration. If she keeps making moves for us, right, without asking you first, it's not love, it's control dressed up in romance. So how do you counter something like this? You counter it by acknowledging the intention, but reasserting your right to have a say. The key is to avoid getting sucked into the guilt frame she's setting up. For example, you can respond like this. I appreciate that you want what's best for us, but decisions for both of us need to be made by both of us. Next time, let's talk about it first. Something like this will work because you validate her intention, so she can't accuse you of being ungrateful. You reset the boundary, making it clear that us decisions require our agreement. right? You keep the conversation about the process and not her feelings, which avoids that emotional trap. I hope you got value from this video. If you did, smash that like button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you get a notification every single time I post. My name is Jessica OS. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.